Imagine for a moment that life is not a straight line, but a spiral, winding, circling, deepening. Each twist and echo of something ancient, something sacred. What if the losses you mourn were never truly lost, but hidden, folded like seeds beneath the soil of silence, waiting for divine rain? We often see the theft, but not the transformation. The way brokenness becomes the birthplace of revelation. Perhaps the enemy never truly steals. He simply becomes an unwitting player in a story too vast to grasp, too elegant to interrupt. The absence, the HE, the long pause, these are not voids, but the spaces between notes in a song still being written. And God, the eternal composer, is not hurried. He restores not to return us to what was, but to elevate us toward what always was meant to be. In the grand design, even delay is sacred. Even the detour knows the way home. You know, it's a peculiar thing. How we measure time by what's missing. We remember the moment something left more vividly than when it first arrived. The friend who faded, the door that slammed shut, the season that slipped quietly out the back door of our lives. We call it loss. We call it stolen. And naturally, we ache. We grieve what once was or what we hoped would be. But what if, just what if, those spaces were not signs of abandonment, but invitations. Invitations to slow down, to listen, to notice the silence between the notes. You see, what we often call an ending is not always the conclusion. Sometimes it's simply a sacred pause in the rhythm of our becoming. A breath held, a stillness pregnant with unseen motion. For in God's eternal composition, no note is wasted. No moment falls by the wayside, and certainly no loss escapes His awareness. There's a divine patience at work, a kind of holy slowness that doesn't rush to return what was taken because it's not interested in mere replacement. No, it waits until the restoration is richer, deeper, more whole than before. Like wine pressed from a crushed grape, like dawn rising from the night, you and I, our tendency is to want what was, to reach backward, to demand restoration in the image of what we had. But God is far more creative than that. He does not simply give back what you lost. He evolves it. And in doing so, He evolves you. The silence in your life, the place where it feels like the enemy came and left ruin. That silence is not the absence of God's voice. It's the space where He's composing something you don't yet have the language for. Think about it. A seed must disappear into soil before it bursts into life. It must be buried, unseen, in a kind of death. Yet no one weeps at a buried seed. They know what it means. So too, your loss may look like an ending, but to heaven, it's the first movement of something sacred. Restoration doesn't always arrive with noise and clarity. Sometimes it comes softly, dressed as patience. Sometimes it comes not as the return of what you had, but as the birth of what you were meant to carry all along. And so, what the enemy thought he stole, your joy, your confidence, your dreams, he may have merely cleared the ground for a greater planting. Not by his will, of course, but by God's insistence that all things, even destruction, bend toward redemption. You are not living in a random sequence of events. You are walking a path lit by an unseen hand, a story already known in heaven's heart. And the restoration that is coming, it will not resemble a photocopy of your past. It will be something transcendent, something beautifully, hauntingly new. Let this awaken something in you. Let it remind you that delay is not denial, that waiting is not wasting, that in the divine rhythm, even silence is a sound. a sound of preparation, of soil turning, of roots stretching down where no one sees, anchoring the bloom before it breaks the surface. You have not been forgotten. You are being written. And in the grand symphony of existence, even what was taken becomes the echo that makes the song complete. It's strange, isn't it, how we've come to think of the enemy, this shadowy force of loss, deception, and destruction, as someone with real power over the unfolding of our lives. We speak as though he controls the script, as though he's capable of derailing the divine. But that, my friends, is an illusion. A very convincing one, yes, but an illusion nonetheless. You see, we often imagine this battle between good and evil as two equal forces locked in eternal struggle. But this is not some cosmic chess game where God and the enemy are opponents. No, the reality is far more mysterious and far more beautiful. The enemy, for all his roaring, is still just a character in a play he didn't write. He may improvise his lines, but the ending is already set. He cannot outmaneuver the author of time. So, when something in your life breaks, when you find yourself staring at a place where joy once lived and now only silence remains, it's easy to believe that the enemy has won, that he snatched something from your hands. But the deeper truth is this: nothing escapes the gravity of divine purpose. Not even pain, not even the enemy's schemes. In fact, I would say that the very things he tries to use to break you often become the raw material God uses to build you. It's as if the enemy digs a grave, but God plants a garden there instead. The attempt to destroy you becomes the soil in which something eternal takes root. And this is where we begin to see that the enemy is not the architect. He's a tool, a reluctant servant to a plan far above his understanding. He moves with arrogance, believing he's stolen your peace, shattered your relationships, stripped your calling. But what he fails to see is that God never lets destruction have the final word. God allows what he will later redeem. And not just redeem, but multiply, because restoration isn't God trying to catch up to what was lost. It's not divine damage control. It's orchestration, intentional, intricate, unfolding in its own time and way. And the enemy, unknowingly, unwillingly, ends up pushing you deeper into the very destiny he was trying to keep you from. It's almost poetic, really. The enemy schemes, but God strategizes. The enemy wounds, and God turns those wounds into windows, places where his light pours in and reveals who you truly are and who you've always been in him. He is not restoring you just to comfort you. He is restoring you to reveal you. So don't resent the struggle. Don't curse the detour. Because the thing the enemy used to delay, you may have been the very thing that prepared you. Perhaps what felt like sabotage was actually sacred resistance, an unexpected turn that forced you to shed the unnecessary, to dig deeper, to lean not on your own strength, but on something much older, much wiser, much more eternal. You're not falling apart. You're falling into place. All of this, the battle, the loss, the rising again, it's part of the song. And though the enemy plays his part, he cannot touch the ending. He cannot rewrite what heaven has already written. So take heart. Lift your gaze. You are not the victim of a thief. You are the subject of a masterpiece. And the brushstrokes of restoration are already in motion. For in the great paradox of the divine, even the hand that seeks to destroy becomes the hand that reveals your indestructibility. There's a peculiar thing that happens when we begin to awaken the idea that we're not merely surviving a string of unfortunate events, but rather participating in a much more nuanced and sacred unfolding. What once felt like random pain starts to shimmer with the faint outline of purpose. And slowly, if you pay attention, you begin to see I Chi, the very thing that broke you has also built you. Now, of course, in the thick of it, in the loss, the confusion, the H that won't name itself, it rarely feels like building. It feels more like unraveling. Like all the scaffolding you thought held your life together is suddenly falling away. You wonder if you'll ever be the same again. But that's the mystery, isn't it? You won't be. And that's precisely the point. Restoration isn't about returning to who you were before. It's about becoming someone far more whole, far more aware, far more true than you could have imagined back then. So here's the paradox. What the enemy tried to use to define your limits, God is using to reveal your depth. The betrayal, the abandonment, the failure, they aren't dead ends. They are invitations. Not invitations to despair, but to discover. To rediscover the parts of yourself that were dormant. The faith that was superficial, now pressed deeper. The identity that was borrowed, now forged through fire. The strength that wasn't needed until now. There's something strangely alchemical about it. As if God takes the raw, bitter material of pain and loss and slowly, almost imperceptibly, transmutes it into wisdom, into vision, into power. Not the kind of power that shouts, but the kind that sits still and sees clearly. Listen out, God, the kind that doesn't need to fight for its place because it knows it belongs. And this is where the restoration begins to take shape. Not necessarily outside of you, but within. The work of God often begins in the unseen, in the deep chambers of the soul where no one claps, where no spotlight shines. That's where the roots grow. That's where the gold is formed. And so when restoration begins, you may not see it at first. It may not look like opportunities flooding back or relationships being mended overnight. It might look like peace where there used to be panic. Stillness where there was striving. A quiet confidence rising from the ashes of self-doubt. Because God doesn't just return what was taken. He returns you to yourself. Not the self you constructed to survive, but the self He envisioned before the chaos began. The self that was always there, buried beneath fear and expectation, and all the noise that told you weren't enough. That's the self He's restoring. The self that prays without pretense, hopes without fear, and walks in the quiet knowing that nothing was wasted. And here's the irony: the enemy never sees coming. Every attempt to crush you became a catalyst for you to rise. Not in spite of the pain, but through it. The enemy thought he was ending your story, but all he did was force you into the deeper chapters. The ones where you remember who you are, the ones where heaven speaks, not in thunder, but in the soft unfolding of your soul. So when you look back, and you won't just see tragedy. You'll see transformation. You'll see how what was meant to destroy you became the very thing that clarified your calling, that revealed your resilience, that brought you home to yourself and to God in a way comfort never could. For what the enemy meant to bury you, God used to plant you, and you've been growing roots in sacred soil ever since. There is a rhythm to life, almost like a hidden melody playing beneath everything we experience. It's subtle, often drowned out by the noise of our worry and striving, but it's there. And if we are still enough, quiet enough, we begin to notice e.g. a divine choreography unfolding where nothing is random and every step, even the missteps, belong to the dance. Now, the interesting thing about restoration is that it often feels like silence, like stillness, like waiting in the dark without any clear sense of when or even if the light will return. And that's uncomfortable. We've been taught to equate silence with absence, stillness with delay. But in truth, these are some of the holiest moments of our journey, because just as seeds do their deepest work beneath the surface, so does God. You may look around right now and see no sign of movement, no reversal, no breakthrough, no divine intervention sweeping in with a trumpet blast. But that doesn't mean God is idle. It simply means the restoration is happening in ways you can't yet perceive, in the stillness, in the silence, in the soil of your surrender. God often works most powerfully in the places we are least likely to look, within. See, we expect restoration to be loud. We want grand gestures, immediate answers, flashing signs that say, here's your turnaround. But divine things move with depth, not drama. They ripple from the inside out. And what begins as subtle can, over time, become undeniable. Sometimes God restores not by giving back what was taken its old form, but by awakening something altogether new. Something better. We ask for what we lost. He offers us something eternal, a clear vision, a softened heart, a deeper trust. And those things, while invisible at first, shift everything. This is the mystery we often miss in our rush for resolution, that God's restoration doesn't always look like a return. It often looks like a resurrection. And resurrection requires a death first, a letting go, a moment of stillness so deep it feels like the end. But it isn't the end, it's a pause, a sacred space where what was makes room for what will be. And so if you find yourself in that in-between place, the H after the loss, the hush before the healing, don't run from it. Don't try to fill it with noise or answers. Let it be what it is you, a holy hush, a space where heaven is speaking in a language deeper than words. Because God is not only restoring what was lost, He's restoring how you see, how you feel, how you move through the world. You begin to notice the subtle ways He's reshaping you. Your reactions soften. Your perspective widens. You don't cling so tightly anymore because you know now, deeply know, that nothing real can be stolen and nothing eternal can be lost. What is truly yours in Him will always find its way back or be transformed into something greater. And this brings us to something quietly profound. Restoration doesn't always roar. It often whispers. It comes like the tide, not the flood. And if we're willing to trust it, even in the silence, we begin to recognize it not as an interruption to life, but as life itself unfolding exactly as it should. The enemy wants you to panic in the pause, to believe silence means abandonment. But the truth is, the silence is sacred. It's where God does His finest work. And it takes courage to rest in that place, to let go of what you thought should happen, and trust what is happening, even when you can't name it yet. Because eventually, what was quiet becomes clear. What was hidden begins to bloom. And suddenly, you realized the stillness wasn't empty after all. The silence you feared was not the absence of God, but the sound of Him restoring you from the inside out. There's a beautiful irony in how we often wait for something outside of us to change, believing that once it does, once the job comes, the relationship is healed, the pain lifts, then we'll feel restored. We look to the horizon for signs and wonders, not realizing the greatest restoration begins within. And more than that, it begins when we remember who we are, not who the world told us to be, or who our pain tried to convince us we became, but who we were always meant to be in the eyes of God. You see, the enemy is clever. He doesn't always come in obvious ways. Sometimes he steals through whispers. Subtle lies wrapped in familiar thoughts. You're too far gone. You'll never recover. This is who you are now, broken, overlooked, forgotten. And without realizing it, we start to wear those words like a cloak. They settle into our identity like dust, and slowly we forget the truth. But here's the thing, you were never just what happened to you. You are not the trauma, the failure, the silence, or the season of lack. Those were moments in your story, but they are not the whole of it. The essence of who you are, crafted by a loving, intentional creator, was never up for negotiation. It was never lost, only hidden. And so, part of God's restoration is the unveiling, the gentle peeling away of false names and borrowed narratives. The kind of restoration that says, you don't need to become someone else. You just need to remember. And in remembering, you begin to rise, not as someone new, but as someone true. It's almost like waking up from a dream. You come to and you realize that the chains you felt so tightly around your spirit were never locked. You were always free. You just forgot. And now, in the stillness of healing, God is calling you back to that place of divine remembrance. The place where you move, not out of fear, but out of presence. Out of a knowing that who you are is already whole, already chosen, already enough. You don't have to strive to be restored. You simply have to surrender to it. Let God remind you. Let Him reflect back to you the beauty He placed inside you long before the wounds arrived. Let Him show you the strength that's been quietly gathering in your bones through every heartbreak, every delay, every silent night you thought you wouldn't survive. Because what's being restored isn't just what you lost, it's the you who was hidden beneath the weight of survival. The joy you buried to protect yourself, the dreams you silenced to avoid disappointment, the softness you hardened because the world didn't know what to do with your sensitivity. Oh, all of that God is gently returning to you now. Not as it was, but as it should be. Refined, holy. And it's not about pretending the past didn't happen. No, we carry our scars. But now, they're not marks of shame. They're proof that we lived, and that grace carried us through. They're reminders that the enemy didn't win. That restoration is not only possible, it's happening. So, take a breath. Right here, right now. Not in some future version of your life where everything makes sense, but in this moment where God is already at work, already whispering, already restoring the memory of your true self. You haven't missed it. You haven't messed it up. You are not too late or too broken or too far removed. You are exactly where you need to be for the unveiling to begin. Because restoration isn't just what God gives back. It's who He reminds you that you've always been. And now we arrive at the part of the journey where everything begins to shift. Not because the circumstances have changed, but because you have. You see, it's not enough for something to be restored to you if you do not have the capacity to hold it, to recognize it, or to live in it. Restoration in the divine sense is not merely about receiving what was lost. It's about being transformed into someone who can walk in it with wisdom, reverence, and joy. We tend to think of restoration as a reversal, rewind to how things once were. But God doesn't take us backward. He invites us deeper. And what He restores, He doesn't just return in equal measure. He multiplies it. He elevates it. He sanctifies it. But only when we've allowed the wilderness to do its sacred work. Only when we've sat long enough in the silence to understand its rhythm. Because restoration isn't just about having again. It's about becoming again. The beauty here lies in the paradox. The very things that broke you, that stripped you bare, that made you question whether God was still near, those are the exact things He uses to build the foundation of your new beginning. He does not discard your pain. He weaves it in. He stitches it into the tapestry of your becoming, not as something to hide, but as something to behold. And slowly, something astonishing begins to happen. You no longer crave what you once lost, not because it didn't matter, but because you now realize that what's coming is not a return to what was. It's an arrival into what always was meant to be. You don't want the old thing back. You want the right thing, the anointed thing, the divinely timed thing. And suddenly, you feel no urgency to force it because you trust the unfolding. This is the moment restoration becomes real. Not just because something has been returned, but because you are ready to see it, to receive it, to honor it. You've been refined by the waiting, humbled by the lack. And now, when abundance comes, it doesn't puff you up. It grounds you, because now you know that your worth was never tied to the blessing. The blessing is simply an echo of the truth that's been there all along. You are not who you were when the enemy came for you. You are not the same soul who cried out in the dark, not knowing if anyone heard. You are wiser now, softer in the right places, stronger in the quiet center of your being. You are not just restored, you are resurrected. And what is born from death cannot be taken lightly. So let the old dreams fall away if they must. Let the former things be released without regret. Because what God is doing now is not a patchwork fix. It is a holy reimagining, a rebirth. And you are being entrusted with it because you've proven, through every tear, every delay, every empty night, that you are ready not just to be a blessed, but to be a blessing. You've been through the valley. You've walked through shadows. And now the light you carry is not a flicker. It is a flame. And that flame, my friend, was kindled in the deepest parts of you, not to burn away your past, but to illuminate your future. So take what's been restored and walk forward, not as someone who was once broken, but as someone who now knows they were never truly lost.